Welcome back, perfect peeps, to Purrfect.Dev. Today we are talking to Tyler McGinnis all about scaling your JavaScript career with Ui.dev. Is that how I should refer to it? Ui.dev? Is that right?
Dev. That's what we're going with. Yeah, we haven't
It
found a
always
better
throws me off with the
the
U
dot.
and then
Oh,
semicolon.
the semicolon. Yeah, that was just a little clever thing for the logo. But yeah, technically, UI.dev is the brand. So
I love it. Cool. So for those who don't know you, do you want to do a little background on who you are and how you got kind of started down this path?
yeah, I'd love to. I'm Tyler. I teach JavaScript, mostly focused in like the React space. So I've been doing that for a while now. I think I started blogging about JavaScript and React back in like 2014, 2013. Started teaching full time at a boot camp called Dev Mountain back in 2000, probably around that same, probably like 2015, 2016. And then pretty much started doing my own stuff a few years after that. So I've been mostly in like the education space around development, very heavily focused, obviously, in React and JavaScript. Um, those are the big things. So when I'm not doing that, I'm usually like running, biking, or swimming, or hanging out with my family. So that's pretty much my entire
Nice.
life is like in one of those 4 or 5 things. So
Code and working out. Perfect. Got it.
that's it.
Family there too.
Hmm.
I was gonna ask you, and for those who don't know, I think there was a React course that you kind of blew up, and that's what maybe sent you down this path. Is that right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, that was 2015. I came out with like a free React fundamentals course. And at the time, React was in an interesting spot because a lot of people had heard about it, but not a lot of people were using it or had used it. So I think it was the perfect time. So posted that. It was on the front page of Hacker News for like, I think like 36 hours or something crazy.
Wow, nice.
Got like 10,000 signups. And then from there, it just kind of blew up. Um,
Was that on
so
your
yeah,
old
that
tylermcginnis.com or?
was even older. That was on a site called reactjsprogram.com.
No. Wow.
So went React.js program, then eventually pivoted to tylermcginnis.com, and now at UI.dev, where we're going to plan on staying forever. Um,
Awesome.
but yeah, the idea was back in the day, React was a lot more difficult to get started with than it is today, right? Because you had um, ES6 was still new at the time, so there was like that whole thing. There was React, and then at the time it wasn't even Webpack yet. It was whatever, I forget the name, like Gulp and like those tools.
Yep.
And so like getting started, even just with like a Hello World React app was tricky because you obviously needed to compile JSX to JavaScript, and like that was kind of a new thing too. Babel was like 6 to 5, I think was the name of it at the time. So the whole ecosystem was just very uh, new and immature. And so getting to Hello World with a React app was uh, overly complicated. They've obviously fixed it now, but that was the idea. So the whole idea of like the React.js program was basically like, okay, let's discover the React ecosystem together by like figuring out all the different parts of it. So
Was Create React app a thing at that point?
it wasn't even close to being a thing. No, that came
Wow.
out uh that came out probably 2017, maybe 2006, late 2016. So it was like a year and a half before that even like was a thing.
Okay.
And that obviously solved a lot of these issues. Next helps with that too. So does Gatsby now.
Hmm.
But yeah, back in the day, it was just not a lot of stuff online about doing it. And you were just like, I think like Brian Holt had one front end masters
Yep.
course on it, which is great. And other than that, it was like good luck, have fun kind of thing. Like you're on your own. So I think that's why in the early days, React got a lot of beef for being like, hard to learn or hard to grasp, mostly
Yeah.
because there was all that like essentially like fitting all the puzzle pieces together. So
It's funny because I'm like running through this timeline in my head and like realizing why I took so long to get to the React side of things.
mhm.
Angular was decently along the way there, and the way Angular goes, it's kind of soup to nuts. Like you get the CLI, you get kind of started really easily and everything like that. And I feel like every time I went to start React, I'm like, this is so hard to learn. Like it's such a pain, but I could
Yep.
see the benefits too. And then over the past 3 years, I feel like with Next and everything else, it's just blown up. So
Yeah, they've really taken, I think, just a really good approach. And I think it'll keep getting better too. I know Rachel Neighbors is doing a lot with like the new React docs, really taking an approach to help getting started and like making it much more accessible to beginners, but also still having obviously the full power of React. And I think it's been tricky for them, especially with all like the new React stuff coming out, because it is like, I think it's hard for them because they're kind of discovering it as they go too, them being the React team. And
Yeah.
so it's like they have to discover it and they have to like figure out how to fine tune the messaging around it and like the story around it, which is a really interesting problem. I think that's why Rachel was a brilliant hire for them, because she's really like a storyteller and she'll be able to kind of bridge those pieces together. So yeah, I'm excited for what they're working on, but yeah, that's the full story. So
Yeah, that's really cool. What kind of made you start to pivot from Tyler McGinnis over to Ui.dev?
That's a very heavy like business question. So the problem having everything under your name is like if you want to hire or if you want to like start scaling, right? Like no one really wants to work for tylermcginnis.com.
I just thought people got tired of like the dog in the hoodie, and I'm like,
Yeah, no, the
I
dog in the hoodie,
love that, you know?
that was the best part of it, to be honest. As the cat with the headphones
Right.
logo here. Um, but yeah, it was mostly just like a decision to focus less on me as like the brand and more on like building an education company, right?
Yep.
And we couldn't do that with the name. And so luckily, like one day I was just casually browsing like domains as one would, found UI.dev was available for a lot of money, and then ended up buying it. And then kind of the rest is history. It ended up ironically being like the perfect domain for us. I really can't even think of like UI.com would be a better one, but like I think that's by like Ubiquitous Industries or whatever. And they
Yeah.
have like a $3 billion market cap. So I don't think I'm going to get that one anytime soon. Um,
Yeah, those two-letter
but
ones are a little
yeah,
rough.
exactly. But yeah, it's been perfect for us, and it was really now, and even like going to where we're at today, it was really the first piece we had to put in place to get to the point we wanted to, which was like again more of like a developer education company rather than just like me making courses, in my closet essentially.
Yeah, yeah. I will say, if you haven't caught our podcast before, Tyler was actually kind enough to join us for creating a startup. It was a podcast a while ago. So go check that out. He actually breaks down a lot more of kind of how he created the UI.dev business and like how the LLC or actually yours is a incorporation, I believe,
Yep, C
got
corp.
started. So check that out for sure. So yeah, I kind of want to show off the site. So those
Let's
who
do
are
it.
on audio, I'll do my best. But basically, we're looking at the new home screen for UI.dev, and it's a nice marketing page. Is there anything to call out specifically other than the smallest text I've ever
Yeah,
seen
the
in this
idea there
area?
was, and you can read it because it kind of makes it kind of adds context of what we were going for. But the idea is like it's difficult to be a developer nowadays because there's so many things you have to worry about, right? Whether it's like the hottest language framework, um, there's a few jokes in here, but like imposter syndrome,
Yeah,
side projects,
I
uh,
actually copied it and pasted it the other day just so I
you
could
know, let's see,
like read
nice.
this like this, right?
Uh, yeah,
Figuring
figuring
out
out
why your back hurts. Okay, you know why your back hurts, but figuring out how to make your back stop hurting. Like,
totally. Yeah, there's a
and
lot
this
of
is a constant theme that I pick up on UI.dev, right? Like, it's a jokey kind of attitude,
totally.
but yet very succinct on like the knowledge part of it. So you're constantly updating the courses and everything else too.
Yeah, it's fun because the language is definitely more fun, but it's also kind of like to contrast that with like the very serious side of like developer education. Um, yeah, we try to keep it warm and fun. So
Yeah, for sure. So we're kind of scrolling into the zone of community. Do you want to talk all about the new community that you've released out here as well?
yeah, I'd
I'm
love to.
gonna
So right,
pop open
yep,
that tab too.
yep. So right now, if you look at like developer communities, you mostly are thinking of either like a Discord or like a Dev2. Well, there's like a Dev2 clone or like Dev2 itself, right? Um, we didn't really love the current offerings. They're obviously really valuable to a lot of people. The problem with Discord and even Dev2 to a point is like there's a lot of noise by the nature of like being open to everybody.
Sure.
And so we wanted to create something a little bit different, a little bit more, not necessarily inclusive or exclusive, but something to where there was more signal, less noise. And this is kind of what we came up with, right? So really the whole goal here in journeys is kind of like the encapsulation of this. If you want to go to the journeys tab, um,
Yeah.
if you think about as a developer, you're constantly having to learn new things, whether it's like technical things or even like non-technical things. Like the whole thing is part of like your job. Um, and so Journeys was our way to essentially like encapsulate that and create a place where people could feel comfortable and kind of safe exploring and like going on these journeys. So what we're looking at on the screen here is like my TypeScript journey. I have obviously a heavy React and heavy JavaScript background. Don't have a lot of background in TypeScript. So this started this week, and this is essentially my goal and my like roadmap for going and learning TypeScript. Right. So the idea is um, really making it so there's a lot like whether I need help or like whatever it is, right? Like doing online courses, as we know historically, isn't super easy to do, which is why completion rates are really low. And so this is just one way of that we've done to kind of help our community members stay motivated and get through really the goals they set for themselves, is this idea of journeys. And then the rest of the community is kind of just more what you think of it, like some places to talk about React, some places to talk about TypeScript and whatnot.
Sure.
And then some like onboarding stuff we do, and then like events and like just more of a generic community. But that's the idea. Is basically give our members places to, whether it's like ask questions about the courses or ask questions about specific technologies, or to really share their journey of whether it's learning React, switching to becoming a developer, whether it's going from like a backend dev to a front end dev. We have all sorts of journeys in there. That's what we're mostly excited about, is to like help our community members really just like accomplish their developer goals. So
Great. So is this instead of having like a Discord or a Slack, this is kind of the goal is to keep everyone in this community?
yeah, we didn't want to create just another Discord or just another Slack channel. They're great for getting like instant feedback. They do have some trade-offs when it comes to like all knowledge is essentially lost when it comes to those things, right? So
Yep.
for us being primarily like a courses company, at least initially, like um, the same questions would just be asked over and over. So what a more of like a forum type community allows us to do, specifically when it comes to courses, is be able to like keep all of our things essentially threaded in a specific location based on the lesson. So that's the one thing. And then also it kind of cuts down on noise a little bit, because like with Discord, it's great because you can really go and you can talk to someone real time. You can see how their day is going. Like we're not necessarily super interested in knowing like how your Tuesday afternoon is going. We want to know like, hey, how's your TypeScript like path going? Like, are you accomplishing the goals that you want to accomplish? And if you're not, how can we help you do that? So yeah, it was just like we just didn't want to create another like Discord you had to join and like get notifications and all of those things that come with that. Not saying they're bad, because again, I'm in a few Discords, I love it. It's just not kind of the vibe we wanted to go with. So
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. So from a platform context, you recently kind of rewrote UI.dev to a new platform. Do you want to talk about kind of what went into that and maybe a little bit about the stack, if you don't mind
yeah,
revealing
totally. I love it. Yeah.
kind
So
of pieces of it?
before we were actually using a company called Teachable, which is basically like a course platform as a service, and they were great for getting to this point. But I always said like whenever we had the resources to write our own platform, we would. And then that happened. And so that's what we did. We basically wrote from scratch our own course platform. It's built with Next, Tailwind. Those are like the two biggest things. We use Firebase in the back end, Cloudflare workers for some stuff with like authentication. And then we also have obviously like Next, like API endpoints we use. So like serverless stuff. So it's been great. It was a lot of fun. We use MDX for all like the content, and it's nice having our own platform now, because everything can live. Before with Teachable, we'd write everything in Markdown, and then we'd like convert it to HTML, then post it to Teachable, which was
Yeah.
a pain. But now everything lives natively in Markdown, and we actually like source all of our content from the file system. And it's really nice. Like if we want to create a new course, then it's literally like creating a new folder, and then like we have like a specific like metadata that we use to like describe the order of the courses and like the order of the lessons in the courses. So it's been really nice, and obviously it allows us to do MDX stuff, which is really nice. So
Yeah, it's actually the exact same setup that we have. One thing that I'm missing from, like, we do a lot more content, I would say, just between the podcasts and like things like that.
yeah,
It's the automation of getting that out to platforms. So I'm curious if you guys will head down that route as well, just being able to publish to socials or like YouTube or whatever.
Yeah, it's so hard because we do have all of those things. None of them have really been big focuses. Like we have Bytes, our newsletter, that's been obviously a really big focus, but that's like we don't even publish that on the website. Like if you only get it if you're subscribed to it.
I was
And so
gonna
we
ask
don't,
that. That's such an amazing tool. I was gonna bring one up, but then I didn't know how comfortable you felt about sharing all of that stuff.
I'll share anything. Yeah, I'm pretty
Yeah,
open about anything.
they're probably the best thing ever. If you give me 2 seconds, I'll bring one up too.
Yeah, no worries. But yeah, so we don't really have a lot of issues when it comes to like cross posting stuff because we keep it very like native to that platform. And if we ever did start doing more Twitter stuff or more YouTube stuff, we'd probably just like create specific content for that platform rather than reposting it. But who knows? That's all theoretical right now, at least.
So hopefully this shows up okay. My monitor is completely flaking out, but I thought I'd bring up a Byte.
There we go. Yeah, Gatsby kind of took this one hard, so I apologize if you're a Gatsby fan reading this one. But
Yeah, I
yeah,
kind of wondered. It's slanted a little towards Next.js.
I mean,
Since
so I mean, it's all true though, right?
yeah,
That's
not to get into the article because honestly, what it's all about. These newsletters are ridiculous. How much information is in it, but yet how hilarious they are too. Like
yeah, we tried to
I read
basically
every
like
single one of them, and that's rare for
perfect.
me.
That's great. Yeah, we tried even like the ads, like we tried to make it
Yeah.
fun to read, right? Like a JavaScript objectively is boring and like you can't convince me it's not. So this is our take of like, okay, what if we tried to like make learning about the latest web trends actually like kind of fun and enjoyable to read? And that's the biggest feedback we get is like people don't read newsletters, but for whatever reason, because we're able to make them like kind of funny, or at least we try to, and sometimes we fail, but even that's kind of enjoyable. People tend to read this one, even though like historically they don't read newsletters. So that's been fun.
Yeah,
That's probably our most the thing I'm most proud of is Bytes specifically because we launched it like a year ago, and since then it's kind of just blown up, and people it's become part of people's weekly routines, which was really fun. So
absolutely. It's an amazing newsletter. Subscribe to it if you're
thank
listening.
you, thank you.
um, the next phase or next piece I want to talk about is kind of the courses and the content themselves. So I'm going to
Mhm.
pop up. I believe this is all of it. I think I have access to everything.
You have access to everything. Yep.
Cool. So there's advanced JavaScript and then the React side of things. I just want to dive into one of these. Oh, you do have a TypeScript one now. I didn't see that.
Yep.
Um,
If you want a really updated one, you can do React Router, the
okay.
one right below that in the middle. The React Router, yeah, that's a React Router v6 one. This kind of shows. So if you go to we're still a work in progress. If you go to like URL parameters is a good one.
Good.
Yeah, right there. So if you hover over placeholders, this is a part where we can get
Oh,
kind of MDXy here, where we can like if you
nice.
hover, it's like contextual, right? So basically, for those listening, it says if you're reading this, you're probably familiar with the idea of function parameters. They allow you to declare placeholders when you define a function that will be set when the function is invoked. And then when you hover over, there's a little code example below describing that sentence. And what's nice about what we can do here is when you hover over placeholders, it highlights that part of the code which it's referencing, right?
Really
I think
cool.
if you click it, I think it does
Yep.
even, yeah, it gives you even a little bit more highlight, right?
Throws a little wiggle in there. That's
Yeah,
amazing.
so there's a lot of stuff with MDX that we can do. I think that's the only one in this post because it just didn't really need it. Yeah, there's another one. But yeah, so
That's
stuff
really
like
cool.
that is really what we're excited about. We're owning platform. We're doing something like this on Teachable would have been near impossible because we just don't
Absolutely.
own that experience. And so yeah, this is it's pretty much like our take of like, okay, if we were to create a platform from scratch, knowing everything we know about, developer education over the 5 years, what would that exactly look like? And that's obviously what we came up with. So
That's a really great example because all our MDX stuff, I feel like all I write is Markdown, and I'm always like, oh, why do we need the MDX
it's a
piece? And
different,
that,
yeah, it's a mentality shift. Like once you embrace it, like it was hard for us too, because we've done Markdown for years. But
mm-hmm.
you got to get to the point where it's like, okay, it helps being a React developer, right? Because you can think
Sure,
about like, okay, we can have components now, which means we can kind of do anything. So like, what does that exactly look like? We have a few other fun ones in there as well. But yeah, it's really just more of like a mentality shift, like almost like a mindset rather than like anything else, which has helped us think about it. So
I want to bring up kind of the React. Let's see if I can find it here real quick. Yeah, this philosophy piece. So I'll just bring this up. I won't play it or anything, but essentially every course that I've taken so far has this intro, and it has a philosophy in here. Can you talk just a little bit about how you guys set these up as far as like a linear approach to learning and what that means
Yep.
for your courses?
So yeah, if you've ever, if you're listening to this, you probably have. If you've ever taken a course, ever like done a tutorial, uh, creating content, specifically educational content, is really difficult. And especially what's happening in the web space now is like everybody's a content creator, which is fantastic. The downside of that is as a beginner, you then have to sort through like what's good and what's bad.
Yeah.
And so the approach we really take is like, by the time you finish a course, even if it's on a complex topic, it shouldn't really feel like the goal is always like, I want someone to finish a course and be like, oh, wow, like that, this thing was actually like fairly easy. And it's not that the thing is easy itself. It's that the way we got to the destination was very methodical and very thought out. And so we were able to essentially, like I always describe it as like a staircase, right? Like we're always able to take small steps up the staircase. And at no point in time did it really feel like you were jumping or taking a bigger step than you needed to, because each step was like methodically thought out
Mm.
uh, to get you to your end goal. So that's really the biggest thing, is like we spent a lot of time up front thinking about the course outline, thinking about how the course can flow from like one lesson to another. So that way, by the time you're done, like first off, you get to the destination. That's the biggest thing. And when you do get there, it didn't feel like a super overwhelming process, but you did learn
Yeah.
something along the way. So
That's really cool. Something I'm kind of curious about, just from creating content myself. It's always difficult when you're coding and you want to represent that. And I think you approach this in a couple different ways, at least from what I remember. There's kind of the pre-built like Stack Blitz or like Code Sandbox
yep.
example of like, here's before and here's after, like the solution of this. I've seen that route of things, but I've also seen here's a GitHub repo, and every single not commit but branch essentially is a step through that process. I
Yeah,
have
we do
like
both.
mixed feelings on that. Do you have any kind of
I have
thoughts
I have
around
I have
how
lots.
that works?
Yes, lots of opinions.
Okay.
So we actually do both. So like, I think the Ui.dev describes this. We have like a vocabulary that we use for it. Basically, the way we approach it is like, the very first thing is you get an introduction to that topic. It's not based on any context, right? At that point, the prerequisites have been established, so we can just teach you this thing. Like an example of this is like, say like props with React. Like we can just hyper focus on props with React. We can teach you everything you need to know. So you can either read it or you can watch the video. We have both. And once you're done with that, it doesn't make sense to really jump into a full-blown project, because the problem is that project has a lot of context around it. I think a lot of like the biggest thing I see bad educators do is they don't understand that idea of like context, right? Ironically, also bad JavaScript developers. That's a bad joke. But and so what we do is there needs to be a gap between jumping into a project and implementing that thing, and like after you read it, right? Again, this stair stepper analogy. So what we do is you have what's called like a non-contextual introduction is what we call it. At that point, you then have a quiz, which is just your generic quiz, nothing really fancy, but it helps you kind of cement the things in your mind. Then at that point, what we do is we have a practice problem where it's non-contextual, meaning the app itself is very simple, right? There's nothing going on. So here's the quiz we're looking at. If you go to the React Router course, does a really good job of this. So go to React, not that one, because that's the old. Scroll down and go to V5. Yep. And so then if you go here and then go to really anywhere like that practice URL parameters. Right. The purple one up a little bit. Right. Up one more. Yep. Right here. So you have the quiz, then you jump into a practice problem. So this one, you're given just a basic app. Like there's not really much to understanding this app. And if you open up that code pen where it says head over here at the very top, or that works too. Oops. Actually, that's the solution. So go back up. Yeah, scroll up and then right over that link right there. So then this throws you into a code sandbox where it has a bunch of instructions, right? So at this point, you've gotten an introduction to this topic. what you don't need is you don't need a full-blown project to realize like to essentially practice what you're learning. Instead, what you need is a very like almost like micro project that's very focused on just implementing the thing that you did. So I don't exactly know what's going on here. You got to add some routes and you got to do some like query, URL parameter stuff,
Yep.
as the instructions say. But that's the idea is now you're able to implement and practice this thing that you just learned, but it's not really in the context of a larger project, which would be overwhelming, right? And so then what we do is you go through the entire course, right? You have introduction, quiz, practice, solution. You do that for a bunch of different stuff. And then at the end, ideally the React Router course doesn't have one, but then there would be some sort of like curriculum or project that you work through to basically implement all of those things. So if you head back to the React course, shows this as well. And if you open up the sidebar, it'll show it too. Where you have, so we have a bunch of quizzes and then we have solutions, practice problems all the way down. And then finally you get to the very end where there is like, you start doing like project stuff. So we have here, yeah, there's like a code split section. And actually one thing I forgot to mention too. So you have introduction, you have quiz, you have practice, you have solution. And then at that point, that's when we implement it in an actual project. And then with the React course, we do that the whole way. Right. So you're getting a very soft introduction to the thing. You practice it, you take a quiz, you implement it in a project, and then at the very end, you do another project to really cement it. So really like the goal here is by the time we're done, you're done with the React course. It took forever to get to that point, but you're very comfortable with React and the subject matter itself because you went through all those different steps of like reading it, practicing it, doing a quiz, looking at the solution, implementing it in a real project, implementing it in your own project. And that's why I always say like our courses we do take us like 3 to 6 months to make because again, getting all these things in place, it takes a lot of upfront like thinking too, because if something's out of order, then it screws up the whole course. If people are confused, they bail, right? So anyway, that was a lot, but that's kind of the whole philosophy of it.
No, it's great. So with all of that and taking 6 months to do something like this, one of the things I think you pride yourself on, and it used to be very well known, I think it's in here somewhere still, the fact that your courses stay up to date all the time. What is that like? Is that just a management thing? More people required to do that?
The biggest thing, it's less people actually.
Okay.
If you look at companies, Egghead, Front of Masters, Pluralsight, all of them, right? They're all contractors who are building their content, which makes it great from a company perspective because they can scale really easily, but they can scale easier. With ours, we took another approach where we said, if you're making content, then you're going to be essentially like a full-time employee with health benefits, with a salary, all of those things. And so when content changes or when there's a new like breaking change on one of those other platforms, they either have to have enough authors where someone will step up and make a new thing, or they have to go to that original person and try to incentivize them to update their thing, right? Like Brian Holt's done. And they do this, like Front of Masters, in their defense, Brian Holt's out there every like 6 months doing a new React course, right?
Yeah.
And with us, I didn't want to have to go to someone and try to like incentivize them on the weekend to update their thing. So we just went with like, hey, if you're doing content for us, it's kind of your full-time job. So you don't really have an excuse if it goes out of date. And so it was really just like setting that primitive in place that made it possible. So it's not actually super difficult because like if something breaks, then we just do it because that's really our job. So
do you see yourself expanding out from React at all? Getting into Angular, getting into Vue, that sort of thing?
Potentially.
Okay.
We'll see. Basically, the goal right now is to become the best place in the world to learn React, TypeScript, or JavaScript.
Gotcha.
I don't think we're there yet. I think we're getting there. Once we get there, then we can kind of figure out what everything else looks like. But for now, we're not super. Again, we're bootstrapped. We don't need to be a huge company. And like, I would rather have. I don't want to dilute. Like when you take one of our courses, it should always be very high quality. And starting to scale to other technologies makes that a little bit more risky because like I don't want to teach an Angular course. Like I don't know Angular and I don't want to learn it to teach it. That's weird.
Sure.
So like that's the mentality I have about it. And like maybe one day we will, but for right now we're just focused. So
Cool. No, I like that. Anything I'm missing? I feel like I'm
no, I think that
missing
was
something.
I don't think so. I think that
No?
was actually fairly comprehensive. We didn't talk about events, but that's like a small thing. We do like uh, we try to do them weekly. It's been a little bit since we've done one, but basically, like we'll invite people from the JavaScript community to come and give talks about pretty much anything. Like we had one on Dino recently. We've had one on Remotion, which
Nice.
was like a way to make videos with React, Vue stuff, Svelte stuff. We've kind of had it all. So
Yeah, I always is the events. Where's the
there's
event?
a space in the community now.
Ah, okay, perfect.
Yep. So it's all in there. And then when we
So
have new ones, they'll be posted in there as well. So
if you are looking for it, here's your events page.
there you
I
go.
think you can get the little notification, all that fun stuff.
Yep.
Sweet. Well, that's an awesome summary. And I think we are prepared to jump into Purrfect Picks. I
Let's
will
do it.
let you go first, sir.
My pick was Motion.dev. I actually haven't used this one yet. I've just heard a bunch of really smart people say a bunch of really good things about it. So this came out, I want to say like earlier this week. The idea is, as I mentioned there, it's just like another take at a simple, easy to use, lightweight animation library. The docs are great. All the examples are great. And again, I've heard a bunch of my smart friends say great things, which means it's probably great. So that's my pick.
I love it. That's a cool one. I love those small packages like that.
Mm-hmm.
I have suddenly become obsessed with Web3. I don't know why, but like in the last 3 days, I've talked to 3 different people who are obsessed with it as well. And so I caught this Twitter space or spaces. I don't know what to call those things yet. Where Nader was talking with a bunch of different people about just blockchain and Web3 and where the web's headed. And I kind of dove into it. There's an article linked in here. Here it is, the complete guide to full stack. I went through this. It took me a couple hours. I ran into some issues, but hopefully no one else does. But I was able to like actually set up some Ethereum things and check out how you can kind of create the block and like go into it and all that fun stuff. So if you haven't checked it out and you're just kind of curious how all of this is working, and you just keep hearing about cryptocurrency or blockchain, a great read. So I'm going to throw that one out there. I'll throw the complete guide in there too. But for us JavaScript developers, it is pretty easy to walk through. So check that out for sure. Let's get to the right tab, Alex. Awesome. Well, Tyler, thanks so much for joining me again. I can't wait to see what's coming out of Ui.dev. I love the new changes to the site, and I'm excited. Like the community is just going to grow like crazy, I feel like.
Let's hope so. That's the plan. Yeah, I'll be spending pretty much, I don't know, the next year or so making it so everybody in the community gets the most out of it they can. So that's my plan. But yeah, this was a blast. Always have fun chatting. So whenever you need me back on, always happy to join. So
absolutely, we'll have to have you back on. Thanks, Tyler. Take care.
Thank you.